It's beginning to look a lot like fishmen everywhere I go. From the minute I got to town and started to look around, I thought these ill-bred people's gill slits showed. I'm beginning to hear a lot of fishmen right outside my door. As I try to escape in fright to the moonlit Innsmouth night, I can hear some more. They speak with guttural croaks, and to hear them provokes a profound desire to flee. Their eyes never blink, and quite frankly they stink like a carcass washed up from the sea. I wish I'd paid attention to that crazy drunken man. He tried to warn me all about old Marsh's Deep One clan. It's beginning to look a lot like fishmen everywhere I go. They can dynamite Devil Reef, but that'll bring no relief. Yohannes is deeper than they know. I'll continue to see a lot of fishmen, that I guarantee. For the fishman I really fear is the one who's in the mirror, and he looks like me. He looks just like me.
Cthulhu Fhtagn, Cthulhu Fhtagn, Cthulhu Fhtagn. That's G'day in Lovecraftian. Hi, I'm Layman Pascal, and welcome back to your comfortably padded cell in the Cinematic Asylum on CILU 102.7 FM in the shadow of the sleeping giant. This is the show where we roam wildly through the philosophical implications of the songs and sounds of film and television. You just heard It's Beginning to Look a Lot Like Fishmen from the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society. That song is based on H.P. Lovecraft's famous short story, A Shadow over Innsmouth. Today it's the special H.P. Sauce edition of the Cinematic Asylum. We'll be lurking and shambling our way through the music and movies associated with the work of Howard Phillips Lovecraft. Cthulhu Fhtagn. H.P. Lovecraft was a legendary pulp fiction writer who in the 1920s and 30s authored a series of weird tales that spawned their own iconic genre and have inspired not only numerous novelists but a great many not-so-great films, both B-grade cult classics and also major Hollywood blockbusters. Somehow the rise of the unfathomable many-tentacled internets has ignited a renaissance of Lovecraft's work. Back in 1995, I couldn't find a copy of his books anywhere. They simply were not sold in mainstream bookshops. I had to get my mom to drive me to Penelope's used bookstore on the outskirts of Esquimalt to acquire a single beaten-up old collection of Lovecraft's eldritch tales. But 20 years later, in 2015, he was not only reprinted in every major bookstore, there were campaigns to elect his hideous demonic Cthulhu creature for president, graphic novels based on his work as well as his life, multiple biographies, and a widespread cultural awareness of this ultra-peculiar individual. Even before he died, other pulp writers had already begun to write stories featuring his characteristic monsters, moods, and settings. This became known early on as the Cthulhu mythos, starring such outrageous names as Cthulhu, Yog-Sothoth, Shub-Niggurath, Nyarlathotep, Miskatonic University, Arkham, Massachusetts, the dreaded Necronomicon, and more. Lovecraft's bizarre ideas have become almost a religion for some people, lurking and lingering at the fringes of the collective unconscious ever since he gave the Elder Gods new passage into our world through the hole that his writings made in our minds. Now, admittedly, that all could sound disturbingly horrible, but this stuff is as ironic and hilarious as it is horrifying. Lovecraft may have had a borderline personality disorder, but his printed works are something like borderline comedy. I don't even consider him to be a true horror writer. Sure, he's cited by Stephen King and Clive Barker as the granddaddy of the horror genre. Sure, he inspired half the horror movies out there, and sure, he arguably wrote the first true zombie story. But if you try reading his stuff aloud, you end up not in terror, but inside some kind of utterly preposterous routine of hyperlinguistic gymnastics and putative cognitive dissonance, about as far from real terror as the Buddha is from a baby. Lovecraft's signature move, of course, is to contort language until it is forced to describe its own limitations. He continually makes it say that it can't say what it cannot say, and that's really saying something. This guy's almost a postmodernist in this regard. And that's an evaluation backed up by what amounted to his retro fascination with people like Dunsany and Poe, the verbose fabulists of the late 1800s. And all this gives him a performative and ironic feeling at times. Yes, Lovecraft is an amateur. Yes, he is indulgent. Yes, he is weird and dry and obsessive and pedantically wordy. But I think his secret is that he was having fun. Maybe writing was the only fun he got. And there is something fun, at least for me, about his favorite topics. The collapse of language, the limits of reason, the stark fact of nonlinearity in nature, and the cosmic invasion of whatever is beyond sense and sanity. This stuff is simply not horror, though, in the modern sense of horror films. We're not talking about The Shining or The Conjuring or The Blair Witch Project or The Nun. Lovecraft doesn't actually make you scared. He delights you with faux 19th century prose, tickles you with the slimy aesthetics of the cephalopod, and makes you skeptical about the very role of description, reason, and finitude in human life. Lovecraft makes you pretend to think the unthinkable in a quasi-meditative gesture which takes you right to the edge of thought. And it's always an all-inclusive cosmic horror, a kind of travelogue-style surrealism with dry, pedantic narrators always on the verge of nervous breakdowns and confronting the atavisms and plurality of their own psyches. Probably the closest thing to Lovecraft was Rod Serling's original black-and-white Twilight Zone TV show, in which droll, mind-bending distortions of reality invade rational American life, narrated by a pale, strangely confident, suit-wearing, hyperdimensional lunatic who steps out from behind your closet door like the straight man in an existentialist comedy to let you know that the rules of reality no longer apply, and that the creepy ambiguity will now be found in every direction. Today you've turned on the radio, but in the half-glimpsed realm between songs and silence, you'll discover that you've actually tuned in to the Twilight Zone.
You unlock this door with the key of imagination. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of sound. A dimension of sight. A dimension of mind. You're moving into a land of both shadow and substance, of things and ideas. You've just crossed over into the Twilight Zone.
Welcome back. First, you heard the Twilight Zone introduction with Rod Serling's vocals and the music of Bernard Herrmann, and then Metallica's Call of Cthulhu, named after H.P. Lovecraft's humanoid, winged, tentacle-faced dream demon, Cthulhu. He who lurks beneath the sea waiting for his feverish moment to rise again and topple everything. Lovecraft loves things that threaten to overturn everything and take civilization, mind, and language to its very limit. That's crazy, though. What is the limit of language? I guess what I mean is that Lovecraft famously describes everything as indescribable. He constantly, and maybe obsessively, uses words that say that words cannot say what he means. It's an unutterable speech, an incomprehensible piece of knowledge, a bluish hue too bluish to even be perceived. Dear God, run! The walls of reality are now hanging by a thread. Sometimes all this is poetic, evocative. Sometimes it seems lazy and hysterical at the same instant. Other times it just seems weird or downright transcendental. Whatever that is altogether is something other than horror, but it sure has inspired its share of B-horror movies. From the Canadian B-horror movie Devil's Mile, here's the tragically hip trying to escape from the trunk of a car.
Don't know how old I am. Found armor in my belly from the 16th century. Conquistador, I think. They don't know how old I am. They found armor in my belly. Passion out of machine revving tension. Lashing out at machine revving tension. Rushing by the machine revving tension. Morning broke out the backside of a truck stop. The end of a line, a real rainbow like an where you could see I became chronologically fucked up. Pretend
Welcome back. You're listening to the Cinematic Asylum on CILU 102.7 FM in Thunder Bay and around the world. I'm your host, Layman Pascal, and right now, I want you to take a deep breath and relax. Get comfortable for a few minutes. I'm going to read to you. I'm going to read a few Baroque, mind-bending, and language-mocking sentences from Lovecraft's classic novel, At the Mountains of Madness. The premise of that story is that two ancient inhuman races and their slithering servants warring with each other left archaic archaeological and geological remains deep beneath remote Antarctica. This has been the premise for numerous sci-fi and horror films, including the plot of Alien vs. Predator. Oscar-winning director of The Shape of Water, Guillermo del Toro, has apparently written a full-length screenplay treatment of this short story, but has not yet found the Hollywood backers he needs. Now, listen to this overly detailed weirdness from H.P. Lovecraft. The sway of reason seemed irrefutably shaken, for this cyclopean maze of squared, curved, and angled blocks had features which cut off all comfortable refuge. It was, very clearly, the blasphemous city of our mirage, now in stark, objective, and ineluctable reality. That damnable portent had had a material basis after all. There had been some horizontal stratum of ice dust in the upper air, and this shocking stone survival had projected its image across the mountains according to the simple laws of reflection. Of course, the phantom had been twisted and exaggerated, and had contained things which the real source did not contain, yet now, as we saw that real source, we thought it even more hideous and menacing than its distant image. Only the incredible unhuman massiveness of these vast stone towers and ramparts had saved the frightful thing from utter annihilation in the hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of years it had brooded there amidst the blasts of a bleak upland. Corona Mundi, roof of the world. This and all sorts of fantastic phrases sprang to our lips as we looked dizzily down at the unbelievable spectacle. I thought again of the eldritch primal myths that had so persistently haunted me since my first sight of this dead Antarctic world, of the demonic plateau of Leng, of the Migo or abominable snowmen of the Himalayas, of the narcotic manuscripts with their pre-human implications, of the Cthulhu cult, of the Necronomicon, and of the Hyperborean legends of Formoth Sathogwa, and of the worse than formless star spawn associated with that semi-entity. Wow, that is not scary. That is sheer insanity. That was a passage from H.P. Lovecraft's novella At the Mountains of Madness, inspiration for the title of famed director John Carpenter's film In the Mouth of Madness. John Carpenter, who also made Escape from New York, Big Trouble in Little China, and The Thing, also famously wrote a lot of the music for his own classic B-movies. I love In the Mouth of Madness because I love anything with Sam Neill in it. You know that guy from the first Jurassic Park? You'd recognize him if you saw him. Anyway, here's John Carpenter with his self-penned theme music for his Lovecraftian film, In the Mouth of Madness.
Generals gathered in their masses, just like witches at black masses. Evil minds that plot destruction, sorcerer of death's construction. In the fields of bodies burning, as the war machine keeps turning. Death and hatred to mankind, poisoning their brainwashed minds. Oh Lord, yeah. Darkness world stops turning, ashes where the body's burning. No more war pigs have the power, and as God has struck the hour, day of judgment God is calling. Underneath the war pigs crawling, begging mercies for the sins. Satan laughing spreads his wings. Oh Lord, yeah.
Welcome back to the Cinematic Asylum on luradio.ca, where I assure you, you are only being held overnight for observation. I'm Layman Pascal, and first you heard John Carpenter's instrumental theme for his Lovecraft-inspired film In the Mouth of Madness, and then Black Sabbath with War Pigs from the soundtrack to the film 300, Rise of an Empire. Now, Black Sabbath does have a directly Lovecraft-inspired song called Behind the Wall of Sleep, but I prefer War Pigs, so that's what I played. And now, as a smile spreads slowly across your face and your eyes widen in confusion, listen to this bizarre paragraph from H.P. Lovecraft's story, Dreams in the Witch House. Possibly Walter Gilman ought not to have studied so hard. Non-Euclidean calculus and quantum physics are strange enough to stretch any brain, but when one mixes them with folklore and tries to trace a strange background of multi-dimensional reality behind the ghoulish hints of the Gothic tales and the wild whispers of the chimney corner, one can hardly expect to be wholly free from mental tension. Gilman came from Haverhill, but it was only after he had entered college in Arkham that he began to connect his mathematics with the fantastic legends of elder magic. Something in the air of the hoary town worked obscurely on his imagination. The professors at Miskatonic had urged him to slacken up, and had voluntarily cut down his course at several points. Moreover, they stopped him consulting the dubious old books on forbidden secrets that were kept under lock and key in a vault at the university library. But all these precautions came late in the day, so that Gilman had some terrible hints from the dreaded Necronomicon of Abdul el-Hazred, the fragmentary Book of Ebon, and the suppressed Unaspreklichen Kulten of von Junz to correlate with his abstract formulae on the properties of space and the linkage of dimensions known and unknown. Wow. Let that be a lesson to the kids out there. Do not mix your non-Euclidean calculus with the multidimensional implications of Gothic folklore. More evidence to me that Lovecraft was some kind of postmodernist, interested both in those places where contemporary mathematics and physics take leave of linear rationality and sprawl out into the unthinkable cosmos, and in those points where modernity fails. For example, if you push the modern paradigm to its limit, it folds back on itself, breaks open and reveals a new realm of vast and counterintuitive uncertainties that impinge on our hearts and minds while threatening to undermine the very logic of sanity and progress. Or so the voices keep telling me. You know, long ago the tribal gods were conquered and enslaved by a great king, the one god-father who takes credit for everything and constantly fights off heathens and devils. Slowly this god melted into an invisible, universal principle of love and order and divine meaningfulness affirmed by the founders of the modern world. But all this, to borrow Nietzsche's phrase, is human, all too human. These things are all sort of comprehensible. We can imagine a god and a devil. We can imagine goddesses and saints and galaxies. We can imagine science. We can tell ourselves what the universe looks like, that it's like a person, or maybe that its essential nature is energy or emptiness or love. But all of that's the kind of stuff that makes sense to us. What if nature ultimately doesn't make any sense? What if light and darkness don't really apply? What if the real gods are impossible to imagine, tentacled, unthinkable, transdimensional pseudo-things that have nothing to do with good or evil and are terrifyingly indifferent to the deeds and hearts of human beings? Fun thoughts to challenge ourselves with, but ultimately we could not live in such a world. It's not in us to believe that we cannot believe in what is. We need to perceive a world that makes sense and gives us our good humor back. We need a reassuring plug in the bathtub drain of chaos. We need a grinning sticker to put over the hole in the roof that Lovecraft keeps pointing out. And that's where the Church of the Subgenius comes in. It's a real religion, but a funny one. It's based on the worship of a transcendental 1950s salesman whose incredible luck allows him to make great deals with the elder gods on behalf of humanity. J.R. Bob Dobbs is a cartoonish messiah placed in a directly Lovecraftian universe, where his silly ability to get more than he pays for things is the key to overcoming the unthinkable nightmares that lurk in the existential borderlands between realities. Praise Bob! Here's Reverend Ivan Stang and the Ballad of Bob Dobbs from the vintage Church of the Subgenius training video.
Let me tell you the story of J.R. Bob Dobbs, bred of man and yet he ugly grin, and he smoked a stupid pipe. He fought the conspiracy every day of his life. He whiffed the stench of many a man, fathered many children with his mighty glands. He founded the religion in which we all believe, brought us all the slack that everybody needs. Bob was the greatest salesman the world had ever seen. He could sell the farts after he ate all the beans. He could sell a pile of shit to a lowly fly. All of us who knew him figured he would never die. Bob Dobbs, Bob Dobbs, he was a real man and brave. Bob Dobbs, Bob Dobbs is lying dead in his grave. Without Bob, what are we gonna do when the men from Planet X go marching through? Our whole race is stuck in jail with only Bob to raise the bail, but now he's dead, so we're doomed. What to do? What to do? He founded the city known as Dobbstown. Deep within Malaysia, it was rarely found. There he studied forbidden science until that fateful day when he came unto his flock in the city by the bay. Few had ever seen him, few had ever dared. Most had no occasion, others just plain scared. Hundreds came to Frisco for the event of the age, when the holy smiling one would step out on the stage. Bob looked to the left and he looked to the right, and he stepped out with confidence into the bright spotlight. All the cheering fans as he strode up to the mic. When his assassin's bullets sent him to his eternal night. Bob Dobbs, Bob Dobbs, the crowd saw their savior had come. Bob Dobbs, Bob Dobbs was greeted by the flash of a gun. Without Bob, we have plenty to fear as we swiftly approach that fatal year. For in 1998 he would have set the record straight, but now he's dead, so we're doomed.
Welcome back to CILU 102.7 from the little white house in the shadow of the sleeping giant. May he never awaken. First, you heard the Ballad of Bob Dobbs, and then Space Truckin' from Deep Purple. The reason I played Space Truckin', other than its charmingly ridiculous name, is that it was the final song in the third season finale of the show Ash vs. Evil Dead. Bruce Campbell's character Ash is from films like Evil Dead and Army of Darkness, where this blowhard meathead accidentally opens the dreaded Necronomicon and has to spend the rest of his life trying to prevent unimaginable elder demons from pouring into our plane of existence and retaking this world. It's a very funny but very gory TV show, full of Bruce Campbell's trademark banal, beer-soaked catchphrases, and of course his famous chainsaw for a hand. Okay, I've been Layman Pascal, and you've been listening to the Lovecraft edition of the Cinematic Asylum on LU Radio 102.7 FM in Thunder Bay and around the world online. Taking us out, we're going to hear Vancouver's The Darkest of the Hillside Thickets with the Innsmouth Look, and then the very weird Lovecraftian Christmas song, I Saw Mommy Kissing Yog-Sothoth.
Kissing Yog-Sothoth in the ring of stones on Sentinel Hill. My brother and I were spawned from the Necronomicon. Dad looks just like his picture on page 751. Now we will work to summon Yog-Sothoth, the key to where the great old ones have trod. He'd surely come unglued, had Armitage ever viewed Mommy kissing Yog-Sothoth, the god.